fast be the red light, my brakes flow deeper than a shark bite. Shark bite, but evolve to the greatest rap name.
Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. Our guest today has been ticking for many years at the state legislature and in our neighborhoods. Patricia, state rep from the 92nd district on the west side of town, is running for re-election as a Democrat to the legislature, and she's here to tell us why and how. Pat Dillion, thank you so much for coming in the studio.
It's great to see you. I'm really concerned about New Haven's economy, and it's really not necessary. I'm excited about something that we're trying to do on a pilot program, sort of in Westville Village. It's not enough, but it's a good start.
So, in other words, you just answered the question I was going to ask you. Is this why you're running for re-election?
Oh, because I love the work, and because there's a lot to do, and it's a great district, and there's a lot of people who are incredibly creative and self-starters, and they always have ideas. It is an interesting period
on the west side of town. A lot of energy. People you and I didn't even know existed. Actually, didn't exist when we were starting out, and they're doing some very fun work. Yeah. So I think you were fast forwarding us to the economy being a top issue of yours in re-election.
Absolutely.
So what's going on?
Well, it's I was looking at the post-pandemic effect, and what's really happened. It's transformed our economy in a lot of ways. Our work habits. It's transformed our housing needs. So remote work has basically meant that a lot of people are not going out to restaurants. The restaurants that we have are relying on takeout, and so much more heavily. Although,
I agree with you. The one exception I see, and I could be wrong because it's just anecdotal, is when I go by Camacho's Garage at Fountain and Central. That place always seems to be hopping, even in the middle of the day.
Right, I know, and
I agree with you that that's an outlier. Because if you go to Rawa, there aren't many people sitting there, but they order takeout, right?
Right. Camacho's is a scene.
It's a regional draw, I think. I know people come from suburbs to go there. Rawa seems to be more the neighborhood, right? And people driving by.
And I can't unpack all the things, but I know the person I'm really gifted. I mean, I'm lucky, blessed, in that people notice things and think about ways. It was Richard Furlow who first...
The Alder.
Yes, the Alder, the majority leader on the board, who first mentioned to me his concerns about what was going on with the restaurants out his way, because there is this perception that I only work on the folks around, Camacho's and Manjares. And so I thought it was right. And then
is he talking about Mid-Whaley on either side of Boulevard?
Well, the diner.
The diner seems to be doing pretty well. I've been there a couple times.
She's got a lot of drive, but
and really a lovely hostess.
Wonderful. They have a lot of ideas, but
they're even vegan friendly.
They're dealing with, everybody's dealing with a higher cost of food.
And it is true that a couple people failed in that before. She's been hanging on a bit. Like a couple people tried to take over the old Westville Amity Diner. And now she's making a run, right? But you're saying she's struggling?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying a year ago, though, I started when I met with people, because everybody always wants to meet. I was trying to back off of Zoom if possible.
Me too.
I really can't, though, because it's very productive.
I'm having I almost had to be resuscitated from the dead yesterday, 90 minutes on Zoom. I can't stand it.
Right.
I like real life.
I know, but I do less, though, but it's a different... I started meeting with people at different restaurants that I didn't usually go to, and I was kind of watching the traffic. Actually, two of them have closed.
So I misidentified. It was Richard's, part of his ward is down in Amity, so he must have been there. I noticed that there have been openings and closings in that shopping center right near the diner on either side. Some of the storefronts come and go.
Right, but his concern, not only is it legit, it's a national issue. Because people are cocooning, and it's great if you bought DoorDash stock 5 years ago. But if you had like maybe 10 people on your staff serving people, and now you're down to 2 because all you're doing is takeout.
So the question is, do you roll with the times and find a way to succeed in the new economy, or are there ways to preserve or make work in a new way the old business models? Like, as you said, Camacho works.
Well, I talked to Gary Winfield about it too. And
State senator,
Or state senator, and basically, and instead of like bringing in consultants or anything, but I did read what was going on around the country, and we put some money on the table. It's a small amount. It's half of what I wanted. I'm hoping that the city matches it with their ARPA money.
And that's the pandemic relief money. And what is this money for, Pat? How much is it?
But it would be, it's only $150,000.
That's a lot of money. What's that for?
It's for, it's to Westville Village Renaissance to administer grants for adapting to the new customer behavior, really.
Because the idea, obviously, Pat, is that you can't subsidize restaurants on ongoing operations, right?
No.
They're going to have to fly. So you're saying that these transition grants are ways to let these struggling restaurant owners step back and change a little bit up what they're doing, figure out how to maybe deal with more takeout or do some ideas for how to bring people into the restaurant.
Right, it's
special
not,
events.
Well, it's an opportunity to be creative. It may take a capital expenditure.
What would that be for? Like,
I don't know, expanding a room, changing a room. You could buy high chairs. You could decide to change.
That's a big deal.
Change your target audience and have different, be more family friendly, or maybe less family friendly. It really. Some may want to build that on the sidewalk, some may not. They don't have control of the frontage, so it's really up to them. They know their business, or maybe they don't. Maybe they're learning that they have to change, but really it's a way to think about, and actually I spoke to Representative Lamar about it too, and he's worried about State Street, same thing, that there are some places that have fewer staff, because they're doing more takeout. It's not.
It's kind of interesting that restaurants have always been a tough business. A lot of them fail after they start because a lot of people have creative ideas how to cook. Like I'm thinking of the soul food restaurant, but maybe not great running a business sense. So is there something different now in addition to that help you're giving them with the transition to new models for business? Or is it also an idea that there are always going to be restaurants that start and close and some that are more long-term, like Bangkok in September seems to be on State Street, a very successful one. Camacho seems to be successful. Is there a nature of this as that's the business?
Well, any family-owned business is going to be a problem if the next generation doesn't want to take it over. And but it is a low-entry business. It's something that's open to people from different culinary traditions, so it's very.
It's part of what makes New Haven great.
It's part
and
of
reflects our diversity.
It's part of New Haven's brand.
So this is the last year that you got the $150,000 grant.
It's ARPA money, the Rescue Act money, which is appropriate.
And so you worked on having $150,000 of that go toward Westville Renaissance Association.
I worked with Gary to do that,
you and Gary
we asked for it.
Yeah,
and. Hoping that the city will match it because they apparently have $115 million they haven't spent.
Yes, they have. They have not figured out how to spend that money.
I think helping the local economy would be really important. But so that's I think we need to pay attention to that. And then the second thing in that same kind of zone, which I learned on the doors. And it's ironic, I did a bill about this 6 years ago, is the big box retailers. We're along with the theme of Whaley Avenue, we're too...
And is the 150 for Whaley Avenue restaurants?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. From where to where?
It goes to Westville Village. Well, it depends on whether or not the aldermen match it. But theoretically, it it would go from, let's say, maybe Manjares up to the diner, up to the Amity. Right.
So I'm sorry, so I interrupted. You said a second big issue with the economy is big box retail.
It's out of our control, but it's also part of the remote work issue.
Tell me about that.
More people are buying online, and fewer people are going into the stores. And so that a lot of companies are downsizing, they're reducing their branches. So on Whaley Avenue, we lost a Wells Fargo branch at the corner of Norton Street.
So you're not just talking about big box, because there really isn't big box on Whaley Avenue. But at the very beginning of Whaley Avenue, one of the urban apparel stores went out of business. You're talking about retail.
Anything involving foot traffic.
Right.
But
so Wells Fargo would be some other examples.
Well, I just found out on the doors this weekend, a lot of distress out in the Amity area that the Walgreens out there is closing.
Is it?
That's what they tell me. Now, this is my constituents who are never wrong.
Yeah.
But I was going up and down the street knocking on doors with me, And
which Walgreens? The one right a block from the boulevard?
No. The one up by the land trust land.
Uh-huh. The shopping center there in Amity. Yeah.
That's right. So a lot of these big, and we're really blessed in that, and I think they worked it, but I don't know how that they did it. We did not lose the Stop and Shop on Lower.
I was wondering about that. That was nice.
And I was in touch with them a lot. They do a lot of good work. They're Greater Dwight people, and I've been working with them on trying to get affordable housing.
They got to do better about shopping carts. It's tough to get a shopping cart there sometimes. You got to be a little competitive in the parking lot.
There you go.
So tell me more about this, Pat. So just as with the restaurants, when it comes to foot traffic retail, you're noticing that this is an issue that people are worried about. Is it more about chain outlets? Because you've mentioned chains. Or are you also talking about, or is it sometimes like that general store in Westville and some of the other stores do seem to succeed if they're not part of a chain and know their community?
Know. When I did the bill in Hartford years ago, the Malloy people hated it, and they told me it wasn't in their wheel.
What was the bill?
I did a bill called An Act Concerning the Future of Retail. I wanted to study. I was concerned about the shift to online and the loss of...
Did that pass?
No.
And when was that?
The Malloy people wouldn't do it. I can find it.
But you're talking about in the teens.
Well, Joan Hartley was chair of commerce and Caroline Simmons, and they loved it.
So you're talking about reviving that proposal now if you're reelected?
No, because that's a study.
So what do you want to do if you're reelected about this issue?
I want to make sure that City Hall is on the same page. They're spending a lot of time over at Yale, and I think that's great. And Yale is working on all, getting state money for their stuff, and I think that's...
What kind of stuff?
They're doing the Yale Venture people, they're rubbing,
Buy Texas startups and Climate Haven, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. They got $900,000 in state money.
So you're saying you want them to focus with you how on the retail issue? What do you want to have happen if you're reelected?
We have an economic development department. I think they can, if there's a job loss and you're losing a large building, Walgreens are not small. We're going to have empty storefronts. And we're going to be losing, in some places, their jobs for women. They've been there forever.
So what do you want to see happen as a legislator?
I would like to work with City Hall, or we should all, as a delegation, be looking at a plan, either to work with the corporate people to keep some of them open, which may not happen. I know... Because
they really don't care what people in New Haven say when they're making a decision out of which of the 20 of the 1,000 stores to keep open, right?
I don't know that.
Actually, I don't know that either. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it makes a difference who they hear from.
With Wells Fargo, I do have my husband has an account there, or had one, and I actually was pretty aggressive in trying to reach through to people, but they were renting there.
Do you remember what was on the second floor in 2013?
No.
Justin Elliker for mayor headquarters.
Is that true?
Yeah. Okay. So basically, you're saying if you're reelected, you want to have the state delegation work with City Hall to come up with a plan to either work with retail people to keep some of these storefronts open, or what else would the plan
look at what new businesses are going to go in there.
And they have entrepreneurial programs in the city.
I know that, but targeting some of these, I don't know if anybody downtown knows that the Walgreens out here is closing.
Gotcha.
Or that it's part of a trend that we almost lost the Stop and Shop on Raleigh, but down by St. Luke's.
And how come we didn't?
Well, I don't know, but I was in touch a lot with the Greater Dwight people, and they had been talking to corporate. So I don't know that. I can't. Anything I would say would be misleading.
So it sounds like economy is a top focus for you as you seek your 21st term in the...
I'm concerned about jobs. And I know they're not sexy jobs, you know, they're not the jobs for the 24-year-olds who are going to be living in those high-rises downtown. And I think that's great. I mean, if they want to come here and do bioscience or whatever. But there's other big chunks of our economy that are restaurants, that are retail, that are being transformed under our feet. And if I have a young person that really needs to learn work habits, you know, being on time, you know, showing up, things like that, you know, you could get a job. I mean, I think I worked in a restaurant, you know, when I was 16, you know, pushing popovers, you know.
I sold fudge at a flea market.
You know, and I worked in a supermarket, you know, stuffing bags.
So you're saying the jobs are there, and that we just have to prepare to perform, or we have to look at preserving jobs that are at risk?
I don't know. There's a lot I don't know.
So you want us to find out more? You want us
I want to find out more.
You want us to hone in on the jobs of the 20th century, not just the jobs of the 22nd century, or the jobs of today, rather than in addition to the jobs of tomorrow.
There are different people in our community who need different kinds of jobs, and some of what they need is just a paycheck.
And what do you think about the work Concat does, like train the phlebotomists and the aides and the culinary people? Like, is that kind of what you're thinking along those kind of...
I think they do great. You know, I love what they do.
Yeah.
I love what they do. I don't know how coordinated it all is, but the prospect of people cutting ribbons down on the east side of town and empty storefronts going out really is not what I'd like to see. So, and I think we need to think about different kinds of job opportunities. If you start out working in a retail store, as I said, I mean, you learn how to order your life to show up on time. There are certain, it may not be something you want to do all your life, although for some people it is. But it's an important...
It's a real job. It's
step.
part of our economy.
And it puts money in your pocket.
We're talking to Pat Dillion, the state rep, 92nd District, running for a 21st term. So I want to brag that I covered your first campaign in 1984 to win this suit.
That's the one I won.
Yeah,
I lost.
I covered the one you lost in 1982, and then I covered the one you won against the same candidate, Republican, the last Republican to represent district since 1994. And I remember that C-SPAN came to New Haven that year, and they just wanted to do an example of local races with debates. So we did a debate with you guys in the 94th and Bill Dyson in the 92nd at one of the churches. When you think back about that, Pat, when you first ran 21 terms ago, when you first won, what has changed in the way you run for office now versus then? How's it different when you run for office now? What do you do that's different?
Well, then I was pregnant, it was, the timing of it wasn't.
But how did one run for office in those years, 84, 86, 88 versus 2024, 2022?
Well, I had organized labor against me, so I had...
The first one you won. After that, was that still true?
The first two.
The first two times you ran when you lost in one. Right?
Yeah.
And that was largely 1199, correct?
Yeah, the AFL-CIO.
They had a relationship because they had a Republican. They felt they could support them. They wanted to show it's like with Riker. They wanted to show there's a Republic. We don't just support Democrats, correct?
Right, but the Teamsters and UAW were with me.
Okay.
Which is ironic. Well, I know you...
How important was organized labor now versus then? And who is organized labor? That's another question.
Well, the Yale unions have a very big footprint in New Haven, so they can be, I guess, very happy. I was involved. When they started. So
I remember.
Yes, I don't know if they do. It's a new generation, but Gwen does. But it's to me, I still hit the doors. I think there's less surface mail.
I love the phrase "hit the doors." It's kind of a fun thing, but it's fun because I think it captures the joy aspect of campaigning, which is that most politicians I know, when they actually knock on someone's door to talk to people, I see a revivification of their spirit and the way they approach politics. Is that I think talking to quote unquote real people sometimes, and not, of course, legislators are real people and lobbyists you deal with every day. It's sort of like when a mayor sees a kid in a school. All of a sudden, that mayor feels human again, and they feel a regained sense of why they're doing it. Am I talking too much into that, or is that true? Because you brought up this whole Walgreens thing from having knocked at someone's door and learning what was going on. Mm-hmm. Do you still, after 20 terms, get that buzz? Do you get that inspiration?
Oh, totally. But and also that the 92nd is really diverse.
Right, you got Westview, you still part of Edgewood, right?
Well, it's 2/3 black and Latino. But if you look at the other districts,
where does the district go? Does it go on the other side of Edgewood Park still?
Oh yeah, go Dwight Street up to the Woodbridge line, and
you go to Dwight Street?
I do.
That is gerrymandering. Come on, what the hell you guys got? What are you doing in the center of town as well as the Woodbridge line? That's like Furlow's district on the Board of Alders. That thing looks like some kind of amoeba. I know you didn't draw it, but I'm just saying that's crazy.
Au contraire.
Really? You think Dwight Street has should be the same district as Woodbridge?
That is my original. I don't represent Woodbridge.
Well, I mean the Woodbridge line of Amity, yeah.
I have represented the
West River. I used to live in West River.
Dwight Street.
Yeah, because you still live there nearby.
I lived on Winthrop, and I have represented Dwight Street.
So it's not about you. I'm not talking about Pat Dillon. I'm just saying the way that district is drawn is kind of bizarre.
No.
No?
No. They added the Hill
to
my district.
So you have part of the Hill too?
I have Hill North.
Wow.
Part of Hill North.
Which I always would argue is actually Hill East. Am I wrong? Hill North and Hill South always look to me on maps like Hill East and Hill West.
Whatever I have Casa Otoñal.
and Sylvan Avenue. That's a great group to have.
And they took away the area over by the cemeteries, Jewel Street and so forth.
They took away Beaver Hills.
The Amity more. And that was because Tony Walker had needed people, and we're different from the Alders. We have a bipartisan commission, and so we have less input.
Less modern art and designing. Okay, so my question going back to was like, how important is door knocking? Is it about getting you focused as a legislator to hear from people, or does it actually have anything to do with winning an election?
Boy, that's hard. I mean,
that's the question nationally. Is Kamala Harris's ground game going to matter, or does Trump's genius for dominating news cycles going to have a bigger deal,
Oh, good Lord, I saw him last night. Oh.
I have to admit that sometimes Trump has this bizarre way of dealing with a moment that is kind of interesting. When he had to say, let's turn this rally into music because someone had a medical thing and he's dancing to music for 20 minutes.
I think I heard Dixie.
Oh, really?
I mean,
because I actually thought that was kind of brilliant, I have to tell you. He said everyone's bored of speeches. He's right.
His brain froze.
I know, it's a really odd brain.
I'm sorry, I was born in Queens, if you recall.
I have a question about Queens that's going to come a little later.
I'm kind of sick of them, the Trump family.
And how are you feeling about the election? Do you think, how's Kamala going to do?
I don't know. I mean...
Am I right that in the last 2 weeks it's kind of taken a bad turn for her, especially in the swing states, that she's no longer getting positive news cycle and people are kind of digging in about the economy and the immigration in a way that's benefiting Trump?
I have no idea. I mean, I'm just stunned at how brilliant she was.
For those 6 weeks.
At building an organization bang, just like that.
She rose to the moment.
When he pulled out, doing those rallies, raising that money, she was on her game right away.
She did a great job
it's
out of the
almost
gate.
like people are taking it for granted. And
She made it a competitive race when it wasn't.
I'm like,
In
"Mother,
5 minutes, yeah.
girl."
But what about now? Like, how is she going to keep it going? I'm not criticizing her. I'm just saying that, like, it's hard to keep that momentum going.
Well, getting people to vote, I don't know. I mean,
So how important is the ground game going to be?
we're
Because if it
talking
is, she
about
wins.
sides.
If the ground game is decisive, hers is better coordinated, better funded.
I don't know about that. I think
Well, the number of organizers she's paying on the ground in Pennsylvania is much larger. The groups coordinating her effort are more unified as opposed to the Trump Turning Point and all these kind of groups. Yeah.
I don't know how important that is.
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Some people think it's not. Some people, one of the top strategists, Roy Grosso, I was once interviewing him at election time, and he said, and he had done statewide elections. I said, so how many points does the ground game make? And he said, maybe 2%. Now, obviously, in the national election, that's a big deal. But when you think about, like, how much more important, like, Trump's brilliance with free media is, and, like, that it's hard to know.
That's the media people.
But how to be a celebrity. He knows how to be a celebrity and get people to look at him, even if it's by being horrible and mean and, just outrageous. People won't look at Donald Trump. They've told me this. I've said to people who, like, don't have his views, say, why'd you vote for Trump? They said, I just like watching him on TV. He's interesting. He's funny. I mean, and that's why I think he was so mad about Kamala coming out of the gate so well, is that people wanted to look at Kamala. They wanted to look at her rallies. They wanted to look at her speeches. They wanted to look at her smile.
I think that's why they did the Springfield story about eating cats. It was to change the conversation.
I agree.
Because she was getting too much.
Mm-hmm.
But J.D. Vance is talking about government monitoring women's menstrual
We're talking
cycles.
about the Handmaid's Tale.
Monitoring women's
Yeah, that's the Handmaid's Tale. Yeah.
menstrual cycles.
Yeah.
And it's not, they've already done it. Trump did that when he was president. He did it, they did that to the women they seized at the border. They monitored the women who were in the custody of the refugee resettlement had their menstrual cycles monitored, and there was a court case over it. A young woman had been raped. I don't know whether she was raped on the way or whether she was raped by someone in custody, which is a whole other issue. And she wanted an abortion, and the director of it was Stephen Miller's shop, but the guy who was actually doing the implementing of it had come to government from the Knights of Columbus.
Wow. Okay, that's the Handmaid's Tale.
And of course there's a New Haven angle, and the Civil Liberties Union got involved, and I don't remember how it was resolved. She may have lost the baby, or I don't remember, but there was a case. Because if there hadn't been a case, I never would have known. There was too much.
So you lived through
you
lived through Nixon, you lived through Reagan. What's your feeling about how you are going to live through Trump if he gets reelected? We're too old to move.
The prospect of young women having their menstrual cycles monitored by the government, it requires.
Now, why do they want to monitor their menstrual cycles?
To prevent us from traveling from state to state.
For an abortion.
Right. That's the point of it. To deny women the right to travel.
We're talking to Pat Dillion, state rep, Nice-Sac District, running for a 21st term, representing the Nice-Sac District here on Dateline, New Haven. Any women's issues that you would deal with as a legislature if you're reelected? Are there any public health or other issues that are on your radar?
Well, I've always been involved in
public health, yeah.
In public health and in domestic violence, because I had been.
You were a founder of the domestic violence shelter.
I wasn't the founder. I was one of there was a group of 10.
And that was very political then. It was kind of people who were interested in women's issues, kind of in a modern way, second wave feminism, wouldn't you say, in New Haven, and we started.
Well, the feminists weren't that into it. That we were really. we had to build it. It was because I was working at the med school as a researcher in pediatrics, and there was kind of a brown bag group of troublemakers that used to meet at ISPS.
Institute for Social and Policy Studies. Yeah.
That's right. And Anne Flitcraft brought her.
I remember, that's a name from the past.
Right. Well, her husband just died, Evan Stark.
Evan died?
Yes.
Oh my, he was a great guy.
There's a memorial coming, actually.
They live in Woodbridge now, right? They moved from
Yes, they did. Anne was in med school, and she brought her thesis to the group. And she was looking at general surgery and how many people showed up with stories that didn't really match their injuries, or how many were repeat customers. And her hypothesis was that it was domestic violence. And a lot of us, we were just interested in it, so I got involved. And we
found that. So what now, if you get reelected, anything on the radar for dealing with domestic violence?
No, we put
protections about restraining orders in the last few years. You've increased those, and guns.
More on the money side, the federal government cut some of the Victims of Crime Act money to Connecticut. The governor put $13 million into the budget to help the providers last year, and the legislators put $20 million in for this year. Now, we used ARPA money because the governor was very rigid about the looming discussion of guardrails, and so. But
the problem's going to be ARPA money is short term. It's not going to go year after year.
Right? It's going to be gone, and if you're really rigid about the spending cap and guardrails, and you have no urban policy.
Well, let's do a lightning rod. How do you feel about? I'm going to do a bunch of issues. Just quickly say where you stand on it. Are you for adjusting the formula on the fiscal guardrails to free up more money, or do you think we should keep the formula from? Okay. What about universal absentee ballot referendum? How are you going to vote?
Sorry?
There's a ballot referendum to allow anyone to vote. No excuses. Absentee
Absolutely.
Ballots. And why? Would an early voting kind of take care of the issue? We're not worried about the fraud.
No, I think. People's lives are different, and the irony is that people in New England, but especially Connecticut, were kind of looking down their noses at the South. That we're so much ahead of them socially, and in fact, for years it was harder to register to vote in Connecticut than many other places, and harder to vote. People's work habits are different. People have childcare needs. I've seen it in my own district. It's really important. And there may be things that come up that you had not anticipated. And everybody's complaining about early voting because the towns have to spend money. Well, not everybody. Voters won't be complaining. But
and some do better than others. Like Hampton did it well. What about marginal income tax rates, having the wealthy pay 7.5% rather than 6.99% on income over $500,000 or $1 million?
Well, the problem with the guardrails is that the original income tax was a windfall for the capital gains people.
And that was the deal struck between under Lowell Weicker, we had the income tax. He got Greenwich and Fairfield County to come on board with the Progressive Democrats, and what they did is they helped the investors.
Right, but it was a windfall for the ultra-rich, and it imposed a new tax on everybody else. And one of the things that was I went off the package.
So they exempted capital gains from the income tax?
They treated capital gains as regular income. So it went from 20 to 4.
Ooh.
Something dramatic like that.
Wow.
So, but one of the things, so I went off the package because they put a spending cap on there because there were 2 legislators who said the big cities would spend all the money.
Right. And also you always were much more attuned to what was happening in the financial industry when you're legislating than the average legislator was.
And my father was an accountant. And
so tell me now, what about raising the marginal? Are you saying it's not about the income tax, it's about capital gains?
Well, the other thing, it's partly about capital gains. It's also about the distressed municipalities. And anything funded under the distressed municipality formula was exempted from the spending cap. The guardrails in 2017 took what had originally been an anti-urban proposal anyway, and I know that they were progressives, but come on, they were progressives from wealthy towns.
West Hartford.
And I know, and they were running through the hall screaming, "You're not a progressive." When I went off the package, I said, you know, "You're taxing my people, you know, come up with something."
Should unrealized gains be taxed?
I think there's
what
another
the
way
right
to
keeps
get it.
bringing
I've
up.
been talking to people about that, but not at the Capitol. I think it sounds terrifying. I understand the policy behind it. I think there's a way to get at that
How?
without doing it. I have to rethink
In other words,
that.
if you're going to tax capital gains, make sure there's an understanding that if you haven't actually realized the gains, they won't be taxed. That's the goal.
I haven't been on finance for a long time.
And it's not happening anyway. But what about the idea of a marginal income tax? You're saying it's not the relevant question. The relevant question is capital gains.
I think I wouldn't hang my hat on any one thing. What I would say,
Mansion
though,
tax?
what I would say is that when the guardrails were imposed and took away the exemption for distressed municipalities, they broke the income tax deal. And for me, and whether somebody else cares about it, I don't care what they think. I mean, I have to represent my district. And the reality is,
So where do we go from there?
if we protected the capital gains crowd and we exempted distressed
So
municipalities.
you're saying you'd be for an increase in the capital gains tax, but building some protection for unrealized gains? I'm trying to nail you down here.
I
Pat.
don't have an instrument for that. What I'm saying is,
But you can give a general position.
we need a more progressive tax
Right,
structure.
so how would you go for it?
And 2017 basically imposes fiscal
Austerity on cities.
on the cities.
I get the critique. So what do you want to do?
I don't want to hang my hat on any one remedy. I can't do that.
Give me the goal.
It could be going back to revisit the distressed municipality.
So more important to you maybe than whether we pursue and never going to pass anyway marginal income tax rate is to revisit revive the exemption for distressed municipal aid as counting toward the volatility cap.
Maybe that, or maybe revisiting capital gains and saying they should be taxed differently. There was a proposal at one point during the income tax fight to have only capital gains on real property, for example, so that it wouldn't be the stock crowd, you know. And because there was a lot of anxiety, we're never going to tax the hedge funds the way some people want to. I mean, every governor ends up running down to meet with the hedgies in Greenwich and promises they won't hurt them. And
Well, maybe we'll get a governor who won't do that. Maybe doesn't come from Greenwich.
Jody did it. Everybody does it. There's
And
a
now it's
reason.
moving to crypto. What about child tax credit? Would you like to make that permanent or improve it?
I don't know that. I mean, I think that should be done on the federal level. So
Gotcha.
I know that is something that is very important to a particular faction. I'm worried about urban people, so I don't want to only attach it to.
Now, did we pass a lower one and we're trying to increase it, or was that just short term, like the federal one?
I don't know that.
Okay. Making striking workers eligible for unemployment compensation
Yes.
after 2 weeks in line. You're for that?
I already voted for it.
All right. How about regulating AI? That's a quick topic. Are you for any of the proposals for regulating
man.
AI?
I have never seen so many lobbyists in my life.
Well, but I bet, you were always ahead of the curve on all these interesting tech questions. You were the first person, I believe, in the country to do a state bill about computer stalking of women. Think of how ahead of the curve you are on that one. That was before the whole AI, the whole doxing, there wasn't even, I don't believe, a Facebook or a Snapchat when you did that bill. I could be wrong.
I proposed a bill that passed though, in 2018, I proposed a bill to regulate Bitcoin. And I got no publicity in Connecticut.
So how do you want to regulate Bitcoin?
Probably just as well. I didn't know what I was doing. Sometimes you do a bill because you're interested in something.
So you want to study it.
And you want to see.
So what do you want to do with
what
Bitcoin
comes
now?
out.
It's 6 years later. What did you learn? Because I still don't understand it at all.
Well, you're talking about an algorithm. You know, I think the whole issue of crypto, well, at that time, it was a group of people who were kind of like the early internet people. They were
idealistic about how it's going to save humanity, but then when their own personal interest and power came to stake, all of a sudden the public policy position shifted and tried to buy all you guys.
And they hated government, and they were trying to create an alternative structure and avoid regulation and do whatever they wanted.
So what about cell phones in schools? Do you want to ban them?
I don't know.
I do. What about free buses?
I'm ambivalent, you know.
How come?
Because of kids who got through to their parents during shootings, you know.
Yeah.
I know that sounds narrow, but...
That's not narrow. It's kind of a big deal.
But I understand the problem. I mean...
No, that's a good. It's good. It's okay to be ambivalent about some things because they're complicated, right? Some things aren't slogans.
Right.
That's one thing I've always enjoyed about talking to you. Free buses. Would you like bus rides in Connecticut to be free? Like we experimented in the. So I always say, yeah, free stuff. More people rode it. The drivers did better with it. Roland Lamar says that's a fun concept, but that when you have to look at priorities of actual riders, there's a limit to how much money you can spend, and that riders are more concerned about improved rates and more routes. Do you think we should have free buses?
Well, I know that in Montana, a friend of mine was a founder of the film department in Bozeman, and one of the things that they did was everybody kicked in and got free transportation around the city, and it made a very big difference. I mean, Dennis is a film guy, but
I thought that was one of the great experiments of the pandemic. Some people say that's you liberals who think you just spend endless money. It's got to come from somewhere. Would you like the bus rides to be free? Would you like CT Transit rides to be free?
It's only a piece of what I would like. I mean,
But would you be for free buses?
I represent the West Side. I mean, taxpayer. We're paying for trains into New York for people who live on the shoreline. We don't have transportation for the interior.
So is your answer yes?
You can't get to. Okay, but will that help my constituents get to work at the post road?
I'm asking.
I would like to see. I mean, Boston. I think it was.
They did certain routes free in Boston.
1840, I think they had the first bus fixed rail system, and it was so they could move granite from the Quincy Quarry, and they later had a fixed route system that went out to Roxbury, which of course became part of Boston. A dramatic change in what happened. But all of that happened 1840, 1850, 1860. Connecticut, I still can't get to Orange.
I know, the routes are terrible.
And
so is your answer...
And I don't have a Yale shuttle either.
So what's your answer about free bus rides?
I would say yes, but I think Roland does have priorities to... I mean, I
So you would
the
support free bus rides as part of a larger package that also focused on improvement of routes,
I
so
think
that
we
your
ought to have
constituents go to bus.
universal... We ought to have transportation all over the city. I think Yale should be paying for a shuttle to the West Side, not just...
And should everyone be able to ride it?
Yeah.
So Yale, because that's been a tough question, because we have a apartheid bus system right now. Should Yale pay for everyone's bus? Should everyone be able to go on the shuttle?
There should certainly, but we even have enough people that have Yale ties or work at the hospital. When my husband was working at the VA, he has to...
So help me understand the proposal for
take a car
Yale.
Down to the med school, park there, and then take a shuttle out to the West Haven VA. Now that's crazy.
So what's your proposal? Yale would do what?
I think that, first of all, I think Yale at the very least should have a shuttle out to the West Side.
For Yale people. But that includes employees at hospital.
That includes employees at the hospital.
So working class people in medical school.
Should
Yale allow everyone to run it? Because if you're white, you can run the Yale bus, but if you're black, you can't unless you come from Yale.
Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, they don't check the white people who try to get on unless you look like you're on fentanyl.
I haven't checked to see who's allowed and who isn't. That's wild, if that's true. But we have the Yale Bowl. We have the noise. We have the crowds. We have the Yale Fields there. I'm not saying it's the worst burden in the world.
I don't think it is.
But the reality is, if Yale is only going to be focused on what, and it may be a term that what Guido always called the Yale Pale, that little area right around.
Pale settlement.
Yes.
That was Guido Calabrese.
He's the first person I heard use that
That's
term.
very clever. So what about bus electrification? Do you think we should fully electrify our CT transit and school buses?
I'd put a hold on that because I haven't been involved in that conversation.
All right, so you're willing to have nuance. So, but here's a question that's much deeper. You grew up in Queens. Are the Mets going to make it to the World Series?
Oh, man.
You've always been a Mets fan, right?
I am, and it's like I get so much grief for it, I don't talk about it.
I've been lifelong. My wife is much more a Mets fan, but she's got me back in. It feels like 69 a little bit because of the fun personalities, and maybe it's all marketing, but you look at Pete Alonso and Lindor and Severino and OMG.
We talked about the Mets the last time I was here.
Yeah.
And
but now this is the year. Like, what do you think about this year?
I think you were talking about Cohen that year.
Yeah.
And
right, whether it's become a hedge fund, like no more idealism, it's just how rich can you be to buy and screw even your own fans.
But it was the first team owned by a woman, I think.
Joan
Whitney Payson.
So how you feeling about the Mets now and this year?
I think, well, Ohio State lost by 1 point the other night, and I went there, so I don't want to jinx anything, but I have a good feeling about the Mets. Can't say. But most important, I want everybody in New Haven who wants a job to have access to a job.
All right. That's a good note to end on. Pat Dillon, thank you very much for coming on air. And just so listeners know, she's running against Morris Sumter's Republican. He was invited to appear on the station. He did say he was coming in, and he did not. Just so you know, we make the... one thing I want to say about campaigning. People don't debate anymore. You used to debate your opponents. Rose is not debating her opponent. Trump won't do a second debate. What's changed with debates? Why aren't people debating anymore? Or feel like they need to?
I don't know. I mean, I couldn't... we had a family illness last time I even...
But it's been a few election cycles since you debated. You used to debate always. But it's not just you. It's everybody. There aren't debates.
I've been at forums where my opponent was there. And 2 years ago.
But has something changed? Going to have to... I mean, a lot of Senate and state rep and U.S. rep candidates, some of them are not agreeing to participate in debates anymore.
Well, Trump.
Yeah. But so what? Tell me about this. What's going on?
Oh, I don't know.
Do people not care about debates? You don't have pressure to be in them?
There may be a concern that nobody's going to watch it. That you're exposing yourself and it's not clear what the audience is. I mean, we haven't really adapted to networks and, streaming, and we're still trying to figure out how to get our message out in a very, very different landscape. I mean, I wouldn't be sure necessarily who would be watching it.
All right. November 5th, we'd like everyone to vote.
Yes.
You're feeling good about the Mets?
I'm feeling good about the Mets, and I want everyone to have a job.
All right. Pat, thanks to Harry Jones behind the controls. And thank you for coming in, Pat. I always love when you come in. You're one of the most... You definitely have always been one of the most interesting people in politics to talk to, the way you spot trends early, think about the big picture, and also focus on how politics occurs step by step at the local level. You've always been one of the big influences on my own thinking. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long on WNHH New Haven's home for community radio.